think you can tell me what to do? Get lost, you clueless fool!
You're just a pathetic old man who should learn his place. The words echoed through Providence Municipal Court like a thunderclap, freezing everyone in their seats. The young man in the expensive tailored suit stood with his chest puffed out, his finger pointed directly at the elderly veteran across the courtroom. His face twisted with entitlement and rage, completely oblivious to the shocked gasps rippling through the gallery. Judge Frank Caprio's pen stopped mid-stroke. His eyes, usually warm and compassionate, hardened as he looked up from the bench. In his 38 years presiding over this courtroom, he had seen everything: desperate single mothers, struggling students, people at their absolute lowest, but never had he witnessed such blatant disrespect, especially not toward someone who had sacrificed everything for their country. Marcus Williams stood frozen, his weathered hand gripping his cane tighter. The 68-year-old veteran's medals caught the fluorescent lights, each one representing battles fought, friends lost, and a lifetime of service. His jaw clenched, but he remained silent, standing with the same dignity he'd carried through 2 tours in Vietnam and 30 years as a community volunteer. The tremor in his hands wasn't from fear. It was from barely contained emotion. The young man who had just unleashed that venomous insult was Brandon Whitmore, 26 years old, son of State Senator Richard Whitmore. Brandon had been cited for reckless driving after he'd swerved his BMW through a residential neighborhood at 60 miles per hour, narrowly missing a group of children playing near their homes. Marcus Williams had been the witness who called the police, standing on his porch as Brandon's car screamed past, missing a 10-year-old girl on her bicycle by mere inches. "Excuse me?" Judge Caprio's voice cut through the tension like a blade. It wasn't loud, but the authority behind it made everyone sit straighter. "Young man, did you just address Mr. Williams in that manner?" Brandon turned toward the judge with the same cocky sneer. "Yeah, I did. This whole thing is a joke. My father is Senator Whitmore, and this guy," he waved dismissively toward Marcus, "is wasting everyone's time over nothing. I was barely speeding." Senator Whitmore, standing behind his son, placed a hand on Brandon's shoulder, not to restrain him, but in what appeared to be solidarity. "Your Honor, if I may speak." "No, Senator, you may not." Judge Caprio's words were firm but measured. He removed his glasses and set them carefully on the bench. "Not yet." The judge turned his attention fully to Brandon. "Mr. Whitmore, do you know who Marcus Williams is?" Brandon shrugged. "Some random old dude who needs attention?" A collective inhale swept through the courtroom. Several veterans sitting in the gallery stood up, their faces flushed with anger. The bailiff moved slightly, ready to maintain order. Judge Caprio raised his hand, gesturing for calm. His voice remained steady, but those who knew him could hear the steel beneath. "Mr. Williams is a decorated Vietnam veteran. He served 2 tours. He was awarded the Bronze Star for valor. He spent 15 months as a prisoner of war, enduring torture so that men like you could grow up in a free country. After his service, he spent 30 years working with at-risk youth in this community, helping hundreds of young people turn their lives around." Brandon's smirk faltered slightly, but he quickly recovered. "That's great and all, but what does that have to do with a traffic ticket?" "It has everything to do with respect," Judge Caprio replied. "And with character. You nearly killed a child with your recklessness. Instead of showing remorse, you walk into my courtroom and insult the man who had the courage to report what he witnessed." Senator Whitmore finally stepped forward. "Your Honor, my son is understandably upset. This has been stressful for our family. Perhaps we can discuss a resolution that involves money?" Judge Caprio finished. "A fine that means nothing to your family? Some community service that gets quietly reduced?" The courtroom was dead silent now. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, her hands hovering over the keys. "Senator Whitmore, I've been on this bench for nearly 4 decades. I've always believed in compassion, in second chances, in understanding that people make mistakes." Judge Caprio stood up, his small frame somehow commanding the entire room. "But I also believe in accountability. And what I've witnessed here today is not a mistake. It's a pattern of behavior that suggests your son believes he's above consequences. Brandon rolled his eyes. Here we go. You will remain silent. Judge Caprio's voice cracked like a whip. Or I will hold you in contempt immediately. For the first time, fear flickered across Brandon's face. His father's hand tightened on his shoulder, finally trying to restrain him. Judge Caprio turned to Marcus Williams. Mr. Williams, would you please approach the bench? Marcus moved forward slowly, his cane tapping against the floor. When he reached the front, Judge Caprio stepped down from the bench, something he rarely did, and stood face to face with the veteran. On behalf of this court and this community, I want to thank you for your service. Not just your military service, though that alone deserves our eternal gratitude. I want to thank you for your continued service, for caring enough about the children in your neighborhood to stand here today, even when facing disrespect and intimidation. Marcus's eyes glistened. Just doing what's right, Your Honor. Judge Caprio nodded, then turned back to Brandon and the senator. Mr. Whitmore, I'm finding you guilty of reckless driving. I'm imposing the maximum fine of $2,000. Additionally, you will complete 200 hours of community service, not at some country club charity event, but at the Veterans Affairs facility, where you will spend time with the men and women who sacrificed for this country. You will listen to their stories. You will assist them with their needs. And you will learn what real service looks like. Brandon's face went red. You can't. Furthermore, Judge Caprio continued, you will write a 5,000-word essay on the importance of civic responsibility and respect for others. This essay will be reviewed by Mr. Williams, and it must meet his approval. If he finds it insufficient, you will rewrite it until it does. This is insane. Brandon exploded. Your father will do nothing, Judge Caprio interrupted. Because if there is any attempt to use political influence to circumvent this sentence, I will add additional penalties, including a suspension of your driving privileges for 1 year. And Senator, he looked directly at Richard Whitmore, if you truly love your son, you'll let him face the consequences of his actions. That's how we grow. That's how we become better men. The senator's face was ashen. For a moment, he seemed about to argue, but then he looked at his son, really looked at him, and something shifted in his expression. Shame? Recognition? Perhaps both. One more thing, Judge Caprio said, his voice softening slightly. Mr. Williams, this court would like to honor your service. I'm issuing an official commendation from this court, recognizing your military sacrifice and your decades of community service. It will be presented at next month's City Council meeting. Marcus Williams stood straighter, tears now flowing freely down his weathered cheeks. Thank you, Your Honor. That means more than you know. As the courtroom began to clear, several people approached Marcus to shake his hand. Veterans hugged him. Mothers whose children played in that neighborhood thanked him. Even some of the court staff came down to express their gratitude. Brandon Whitmore stood alone with his father, watching this display. For the first time since entering the courtroom, his arrogance had completely disappeared. He looked young, confused, and perhaps finally ashamed. Judge Caprio called out one last time. Mr. Whitmore, I hope you understand something. This isn't about punishment. It's about transformation. You have a choice now. You can remain bitter and entitled, or you can use this experience to become the kind of man your community needs. The kind of man like Marcus Williams. 3 months later, something remarkable happened. Brandon Whitmore stood before the city council, tears streaming down his face as he read from his essay. But he didn't just read the required words, he spoke from his heart about the veterans he'd met, the stories he'd heard, the humility he'd learned. Next to him sat Marcus Williams, nodding with approval. When Brandon finished, the room erupted in applause. Judge Caprio, sitting in the audience, smiled quietly. This was why he'd spent nearly 4 decades on the bench, not to punish, but to transform. Not to break people down, but to build them up into who they were meant to be, justice. Judge Caprio had always believed wasn't just about the law. It was about humanity, compassion, and the courage to hold people accountable while still believing in their capacity for change. And on that day in Providence Municipal Court, everyone witnessed what real justice looked like.